Thanks for joining us today. I just want to remind those of you who are here live with us that if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat box. We're going to be recording the first portion of this group, and then there'll be a chance to chat afterwards. My name is Stephanie. I have been with Camray for almost 14 years now, I think it is. And I've been with the Early Years Parent Support Program as the coordinator for most of that time. I put together this group today, and it's called Why is My Child Behaving So Badly? My own children were the inspiration for this group, which may be good, may be bad. They're 3 and 5 years old. And I recently noticed a pretty marked change in my son's behavior. And so being in the position I'm in and working with a bunch of professionals in this field, I decided to ask as many people as I could and say, like, what could be going on here? Because I'm exhausted and not able to figure this out. And what I thought would be helpful was to compile some of the most important suggestions and helpful suggestions I got, and share that with other families. I think what was really nice is that it's coming from experience. So this is not based off of any sort of research study or book. This is just a bunch of professionals coming together and saying, these are the reasons that we're most likely to see an out of character challenge with a young child's behavior. I do want to start off, as I say with most groups, by saying that, putting my little disclaimer on there, parenting education is not one size fits all. This doesn't mean this is going to always apply to your child. It may or may not work, but it is a place to start from. And I think when getting feedback from some of the counselors and workers within this field, what we all sort of agreed upon is that when we're working individually with a family where there's a concerning behavior or the child's sort of acting out of character, and we're not really sure what's going on, but we know something is going on, we sort of solidified everything into 3 main areas. And these are not the areas necessarily that's causing the bad behavior. There could be a lot going on. But what we find is these are the 3 areas we want to rule out. These are the things that are the quickest fixes and most likely things to be causing the change in behavior. And that once we've ruled out these 3 areas, then we may want to look further into the situation. We'll look closer into it and see if there's something psychological going on, or we may raise cause for concern medically. We might say, hey, can you try going to a professional in this field or that field, or can you try with your family doctor and see if we can get some referrals? Most families seem to think that's the first step, and it's not. The first step is to try to figure it out and see if there's little minor changes that you can make that could make a big difference for your child. And I would say most of the time it does fall into one of these 3 categories, and that's usually the fix we're looking for. I just want to look through this slide. I kind of talked through it, but didn't quite read it out. Yeah, I think just, like it says here, the actual answer isn't always clear. It's likely to be a mix of things. It's usually not just one thing, but maybe making 1 or 2 changes can have a huge impact on what's going on for the child. So most of the time, especially under the age of 8, we want to look at the following 3 things that I'm going to go through and rule them out as the reason for the misbehaviors or change in behavior before we go any further. The first area we want to look at is exhaustion. So exhaustion, I've sort of broken up into a few categories. There's lots of reasons why kids can be exhausted. There's more reasons why an adult can be exhausted. But the first one I look at is lack of sleep. Sleep is a really debated topic. I tend to do it the very North American way. My kids go to bed around 6:37 every night because no matter what time I put them to bed, they're up by like 6 to 7 a.m. So that works really well for me. I was talking to a friend recently who was from Europe, and Europe's a large place, but in general, Europeans tend to do this similar way. And she was telling me that it's very common for kids to go to bed much, much later than that. That if parents work till 5 or 6 o'clock, they come home, make dinner, spend time with the family, and so kids go to bed later. I know for me, even when my husband works late, or I generally don't work too late, but when he does, my kids still go to bed. So sometimes he does, sometimes by the time he gets home, the kids are in bed asleep. So it just depends where your priorities are. And my true belief is that there's no right way to do it. You have to do it in a way that works for you and your family. But if we are seeing changes in behavior and it's really affecting your child, we may want to look at, in a 24-hour time span, do they need to be getting more sleep, more solid sleep? If we look at things like night terrors, like maybe it looks like your child is sleeping a solid 11 hours at night, or not solid, but for 11 hours in the night, and you're like, oh no, that's great, they've got lots of sleep. But if the quality of the sleep is lacking, if there's lots of wake ups, my son wakes up a lot. Recently, he'll come and get me. But when he was younger, he would wake up a lot and not necessarily make any noise. But I sometimes I'd be in the room or I could hear him, and I could hear that he was waking up a lot. And I think that just affected the quality of his sleep. So overall, he was getting enough hours, but he wasn't getting that real restorative deep sleep that he needed. And you could tell that it was affecting him. Like I said, there's no right way of dealing with sleep. You just got to figure out what works for you and your family, or you can talk to one of our support workers. You can try to contact a sleep consultant and try to look at scheduling out your child's sleep if you think this could be the source of the behavior. I know that for my children, lack of sleep is the number one reason I see a difference in their behavior, especially with my son. If he doesn't get 11 hours of sleep, there is a difference the next day. He becomes more irritable. He recently, why this whole group got started and why I was looking for some support is he went through a phase recently where he would wake up every 20 minutes to an hour at nighttime and have a full-blown temper tantrum. And he was angry that he couldn't sleep. He was tantruming because he was so upset that he couldn't sleep, but he just kept waking up, and then he would be in this state of arousal that he couldn't calm down from. And the whole family wasn't sleeping, and we were all angry. We were all irritable. And from that point of exhaustion, I couldn't even think straight enough to figure out what could be going on with him. And so I was consulting with people and trying to devise what this could be and looking at these three categories. And it turned out it really was just he was getting in this cycle of not being able to sleep. And I had written out a schedule looking at what he had done over the past few days and realizing that we were putting him to bed about an hour later for the 3 days prior. We had some family visiting and we just wanted to spend some quality time together. We wanted to pick them up from the airport. And so what ended up happening was he just that little bit of a later bedtime was affecting him so much that he just couldn't even function. And in order to fix it, I tried two things. One was he ended up having I can't remember if it was 6 or 6:30 bedtime. And the other thing was I ended up having to purchase a really inexpensive, but a weighted blanket. And the combination of those two things made a huge difference. And that same night he was sleeping through the night again. So that was a relatively quick fix. But to see the difference in his daytime behavior and nighttime behavior, just based on this one little shift of going to bed half hour to hour later than he was used to, it was amazing. Like I couldn't believe that such a little shift had caused such a huge behavioral change. So look at little things that might be different. Take out a piece of paper and a pen, go through your child's schedule, look at what could be changed and that their bodies just might not be okay with. If there's a temperature change, there's lots of heat, that can also affect the quality of sleep or the need for more sleep. And since we're on the topic of sleep, naps could be a whole group in and of themselves. So I won't go too far into it, but another reason for exhaustion could be that either a child is getting too much sleep, so they're napping, but really their body doesn't need that nap anymore. And so then they're causing a huge difference in, like you're seeing behavioral changes at nighttime close to bed because they're acting out because they're not tired. And the other one too is I often see parents saying, oh, my child puts up such a fuss at nap time, and so we don't do naps anymore. Or there could be lots of reasons. Maybe there's other siblings in the house and we just can't accommodate naps unless they manage to fall asleep in the car. Like there's so many reasons why we might get rid of our child's nap, but it can cause a huge behavioral change if that child still really needs to be napping. For me, the magic age was 3. Both my kids nap till at least 3. My son, when he's in daycare, so even though we remove the nap, he's 3.5 now, and he still naps on the days that he goes to daycare. and then we just put them to bed a little bit later those nights. My daughter also at 3 stopped napping, but I've heard of kids as young as like 9, 10 months. That seems really young to me, but it might be true. And then I've heard of kids who are 5, 6 years old still napping, like kids who are in kindergarten and napping on the weekend still. So you need to watch your child's behavior and adjust according to the behavior. Let's see if I can get this slide to change. I forgot to go through the what we can do for the previous slide, but I think I mentioned a lot of it already. Because there's so many different reasons. I think, speaking to a one-on-one worker, speaking to a sleep consultant, or speaking to your family doctor, those are 3 people that you can discuss these issues with if you need some support on sleep. There's lots of great sleep books out there, but there's also lots of really bad sleep books out there. There's Facebook groups where you can join where they talk about sleep. It's really hard because you can get a lot of misinformation or a lot of differing information. So the key is to take what makes sense for you and your family. If you don't want to do sleep training or you want to do all attachment-based stuff, then you can be taking some of that material and working with that in regards to sleep. Another reason for exhaustion is illness. I'm not going to go too much into depth on this because there really isn't much you can do. But without fail, I know my kids, usually a day or 2 before they actually get sick, I notice a change in behavior. And I keep thinking, I have a moment where I step back and I think, is this exhaustion? Is this, is that? And I think maybe they're getting sick. And usually the next day they get sick and I'm like, that was it. So, we're not seeing a huge shift for a long period of time. It might be just a day or 2, but before you start to worry, I would usually say to families, okay, if it's only been a day or 2, can you give this a couple more days to see if this is like an ongoing change in behavior? I just find kids tend to be really reactive, really hypersensitive. They might talk about hurting or feeling sick, or they might even say my throat hurts. I think, as is the case with many adults, children will obviously act out of character if they're sick. So giving them a little leeway and giving them a little bit of love and attention, more so than you normally would. I think that those are the ways to go. There isn't really an easy fix other than just riding out the illness, treat it, and take comfort in knowing that once the sickness passes, the behavior likely will too. Growth spurts is the next one. This one came to mind because my son always seems to be my son, but he had a few days a while back where he kept saying, my legs are hurting, and I kept saying, you're being lazy, you just don't want to walk, like, come on, we gotta, I'm not putting you in the buggy, you gotta start getting your body moving, you need to be active. And he just kept talking about his legs hurting. And a few days after the incident, when where he was saying all that, I went to go put some clothes on him, and they were way too short. And his shoe size, like his runners, just literally didn't fit anymore. He had grown a full shoe size within a few days. And I thought about it and I was like, wow, like when I was pregnant, I remember my body changing and growing, and every day feeling aches and pains and tiredness. And that's what happens when your body changes really fast. And so that can cause some behavioral changes. And maybe his growth spurt was really quick. But some kids, you might be looking at a week, 2 weeks. It could be a while for that. So that could be why you might be seeing your child being extra tired or talking about aches, pains. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't believe my son. I thought he was just trying to get out of walking and wanting me to carry him. And I felt super guilty afterwards. So just taking those things into account, because a 3-year-old's not going to tell you, yeah, I'm just noticing a difference and I feel bigger, or my legs are stretching, or they're not going to be able to articulate that. So just keeping in mind that a growth spurt could be behind why you're seeing a difference in behavior for a couple weeks. What can you do? Again, this one's easier just to wait out. But it just feels better knowing that could be the cause, and understanding why there's a change in behavior will sort of ease your anxiety about it. I think this is the last one for exhaustion, physical exhaustion. Little bodies can overdo it really easily. Sometimes my children act out a lot after playing, or We're in the middle of the summer right now. It's extremely hot. And so I think that, sorry, I think that was actually one of the extra ones. Maybe I can talk about them together, but being outside playing all day in the fall is different from playing for 3 hours outside in the summer, right? Like the heat is going to affect their little bodies a lot more. So just the physical exhaustion, sometimes I forget, like we'll leave the house 9 a.m. in the morning and we've got this appointment and then that appointment, and then we're going to go play here, and then we go here, and then, oh, we're going to drive and visit grandma and grandpa on the way home. And then I forget, like, oh my gosh, we've been out of the house all day long. And they're just absolutely pooped and they want to go to bed early. So just remembering that their little bodies can't always handle what our bigger bodies can, and that could be a reason for why we're seeing some changes in behavior. And I'm not just talking about one day. I mean, like in one day, we can probably say, oh gosh, they did a lot today. But remembering that the next day, they may still be affected by the day before. Thankfully, my daughter, who's 5, is great at articulating and saying, like, Mommy, can we just stay in today? And when I sort of pry a little bit more, she'll say, like, we've been out a lot and I just want to play at home with my toys today. And so if we can do that, we do that. And I find that her behavior improves because she just needed a little alone time in her room to do her thing. She didn't want to be out and about and physically using her body all day, every day. And then, like I said, sorry, I'm just going to go through the what can you do here. This is one of the ones where the longer term benefits outweigh the short term issue. If you've been doing a lot of physical activity or over the course of a few days and noticing a behavior change, you may just need to compensate with an earlier bedtime, offering a nap, or like I said, having some home time. If naps aren't an option, quiet time or rest time each day is great. So if you do notice right now, like I said, in the summer, 2 hours playing outside is a lot more exhausting than it would be in the winter or the fall or the spring. And so we just come inside and we do some quiet, restful activities. Sometimes we do some crafts, something that gives their body a bit of a break. And like I said, I think there's a slides of the heat one. But that was one of the other ones I added on here, was just heat. I know I've spoken to it already in terms of physical exhaustion, but I think heat in and of itself, we've had a remarkably hot summer this summer. And so just being outside in the heat, doing nothing can affect our bodies. So remembering that with little bodies, like they need some time to cool down. Thankfully in the Lower Mainland, it still gets a little colder at night. A big thing I do with my kids is if it's been a pretty hot day, I offer a lot of cold foods. I offer, warm to cold bath. And then at nighttime, our place can be quite hot. And so I don't, my daughter actually recently keeps getting up at night because she says she's too hot at night. And so I buy those dollar store ice packs and we wrap it in a cloth and she puts it in bed, and she sometimes in the middle of the night will get out and grab a different one and put it in there and go back to bed. But whatever we can do to cool our body down so that we're not feeling that excessive exhaustion is really helpful. The second one, as you probably can already see on this side here. So the second reason I always look into is nutrition. And there's a few different areas of nutrition. The main one, not the main one, but one of them being hungry. We all, the nice thing is even from a really young age, children can express this quite well. Like we know when our kids are hungry, but that can be, I am irritable when I am hungry. Thus, I don't really blame my children for being irritable when they're hungry, but that tends to be a shorter term behavioral change. Like we might, unless they're hungry over the course of many days, which I hope is not happening. Like for the most part, most kids get what they need. So if this is it says here, this is an easy one. If they're hungry, feed them. Try to provide lots of water and nutritious snacks. So if you're noticing it's a longer term issue, like this is going on over a few days or more, it could be that the food that they're getting is not filling enough. In the warmer months, it's really tempting to give kids popsicles and nice things that help cool their bodies, but it's not actually giving them the nutrients they need for their body to feel full. So then they just keep going and trying to get more and more food, lots of fruit. But there needs to be a balance in the diet, and there needs to be something solid that's helping them feel full. So trying to give snacks with proteins, for example, is a great idea. I know when it's hotter out, they don't want lots of warm food. So we do like veggies with hummus, and that's a really great way to get some balance in there. I think the bigger issue with nutrition that I see more commonly is sugar and processed food. I'm trying to switch the slide, but it doesn't want to go. So again, this is another topic that could fully be its own group. It could be 4 different groups, 10 different groups. I am not going to give people a lecture. The vast majority of parents that I speak to know very well that these are not great things for children. What they don't often stop and think about is the impact that it's not just about their weight and their health, it's literally affecting children's behavior. And sometimes sugar can still be natural. For example, my kids love those little applesauce, the unsweetened applesauce. It's a natural sugar. It's still coming from apples. There's no added sugars, but it's still a huge dose of sugar. So for my kids, it's less to do with the quality of the sugar, and anything that has a high sugar content, the rush that they get is like nothing I've ever seen. It causes huge changes in behavior. And I might offer that snack at 11 a.m. and I'm still seeing the result of that at 7 p.m. Because they're getting the high from the sugar and then they're crashing. And then it's just this emotional roller coaster for the rest of the day. Like the nutrition piece could be its own group. I think if you need to discuss it with a nutritionist or a doctor or a dietitian, a naturopath, someone that you trust, there is a lot of misinformation out there. So, check your sources. It's okay to get stuff from Pinterest and Instagram. In fact, there's some really great Instagram accounts. I think one of them is called Kids Eat in Color. So I try to get my information from people who have an expertise in the area. So not necessarily a mom like me, but someone who's a dietitian or a nutritionist. I will try to consult with them, or at least follow people on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, who I know have those credentials, and looking at how to reduce the amount of sugar your child's getting in a day. And I'm going to throw processed foods in there as well, just because I think that when kids are consuming too much processed food, it means that it's taking the place of healthier food. So it's not necessarily that having some sort of processed food or having crackers or whatever it might be is the problem. But if those processed foods do not contain enough nutrients, you're going to see things like iron deficiency. So then the child's going to be weak, going to be tired, and we don't know why. Maybe offhand, but then we're realizing, hey, their diet is really, I'm thinking of my son right now. He lives off of crackers and fruit. That's great, but I love that he eats fruit. But in the end, it's processed foods and sugar, right? It's not necessarily what his little body needs. There's some nutrients coming in from the fruit, but last time I checked, most crackers don't have a ton of nutrients. I think we can see huge differences in children's behavior. If you suspect that this is a reason why, or even if you don't suspect it, but something's going on and we need to check this out, then I would recommend making a little journal. You don't have to share it with anyone if you don't want to. I know for me, writing it down, I get kind of embarrassed and then I don't want to tell anyone, or I want to lie. But maybe it's just for yourself to say, like, what am I actually feeding my child in a 3-day time span, or even a 1-day time span? Like, what does their diet really look like? And when you review it and you see, like, oh, wow, like they're not getting enough nutrients, or they're eating too much of this or that, then it can help you make little adjustments. I think if you feel uninformed in terms of what constitutes a balanced diet, that's when you may want to involve someone else with more expertise. But for the most part, I think parents know it's literally just the lack of time and energy. I had someone recently, I read something that said, like, any granola bar that's over 5 grams of sugar is essentially just a cookie. It's not a protein bar, it's not a granola, it's just a fancy cookie. And I kept that in mind. So when I think about something that we can do, aside from what I've already mentioned, as a mom, the best advice I can give is swapping out for healthier choices. So not having granola bars in school lunches or daycare lunches is not an option for me. it's just such a quick, easy snack. I can throw it in my backpack, or I can put it in their lunch. It doesn't go bad. But I've swapped out granola bars with high sugar, so that for granola bars that have, less than 5 grams of sugar, maybe have some fiber and have, like 4 or 5 grams of protein. And those do exist. They are a little more pricey, but I'd rather have a healthier granola bar or option than just giving them pure sugar. I've seen some granola bars that can go up to like 21 grams of sugar, and it's like, you may as well just be giving them a glass of Coke. What are some other swap outs I was thinking of? I know, like, instead of popsicles, my kids love popsicles in the summertime. So what I do is I buy those yogurt tubes and I throw those in the freezer. Yes, there's sugar content, but it's nowhere near what most popsicles are. The other thing you can do is make your own fruit smoothies. And then freeze those in the little popsicle molds. Again, there is sugar content, but it's lower, or at least it's more natural than buying like really high sugar popsicles at the grocery store. And the nice thing too is that I know when we make smoothies, I throw some spinach in there, and I throw some healthier things in there. And as long as it's frozen with a stick in it, my kids will eat it. So there's lots of different little swap ups you can do. And I know like Instagram and Pinterest, those are great places to find some of the other ideas. The third category is life changes. Now, this is the biggest topic, but I think has the fewest slides because there's so many different life changes that can happen. And so it's hard to go through all of them, and you may need the support of another person to do that. But just knowing that the life change itself is the reason why the behavior might be happening. Some changes may seem really small and insignificant to an adult, but really big to a child. So this causes them to act out, but it may be hard to connect the behavior change with why they're having a hard time. Just because we may have seen the life changes being really insignificant. So the first one here is loss. This one tends to be obvious, right? This is death or separation. So most people will say, oh, there's been a major death in the family, or mom and dad got separated or divorced. Like, this is one that most people can identify, but they sometimes forget things like maybe a family pet. If it was a fish, as a parent, we might say, yeah, a fish died, that's what they do. But that might be a major loss to your child. My son recently lost his favorite little stuffy toy that goes everywhere with him, or went everywhere with him, and he slept with it all night long. And he's had it in his hands every day of his life, I want to say for the past 2 years. He was devastated when he lost his little meow meow cat. And I am not kidding you. I traveled the city. We happened to be out and about that day, and I have no idea where we lost it. And I traveled the city trying to retrace our entire steps, trying to find this cat. Did not find it. He was devastated for a while. We went through a whole process where we chose a new doll that he could have at night. But the loss was really significant for him. And it was really hard for my husband and I, because we kept saying, in the end, it's just a doll. Like, I get that you're sad. And he kept saying, but it's my best friend, Mama. So we want to look at things like that, especially with younger children, because if they're not able to communicate, if your 2-year-old has lost their favorite blanket or their favorite lovey, they might not be able to tell you that's why they're so upset. So we want to look at stuff like that. Another obvious one, starting school, daycare, preschool, there's a lot of separation anxiety. It's just a big life change. Schedule changes. This one tends to go a little less noticed, but like if there's a big change in schedule, school's out, daycare's out. So I can think of a million different reasons why we would change our schedule. Maybe mom or dad's got a new job. Not all kids, but most kids love predictability and consistency. And so when you change anything, you're going to see, depending on the resiliency of the child, you're likely going to see at least some reaction to it. The difference is some react better than others. A big life change is moving. We recently moved out of the country and then back. It was a temporary 4-month move. And it took weeks for my children to adjust to the initial move, and then weeks for them to adjust to the move back. We gave them a little leeway, and I just kept saying, like, okay, this is different, right? Like, this is a different setting for them. And then they finally got settled, and we changed it again, and we've changed daycares and done this and done that. So it's just important to know that that could be a reason for the different behaviors. I don't know if this really falls into the life changes one, but I kind of squeezed it in there, is learned behaviors. It could be the introduction of someone new who's behaving a certain way and they're modeling or mimicking that behavior, or someone that has been in their life for a while, but they've recently learned that behavior. I had a friend who her son was picking up a behavior from his cousin. And so his cousin had learned something at school, and it was, I can't even remember what it was. It was some sort of bad thing. I don't know if it's like spitting or something like that. It wasn't too bad. But then he picked up the behavior. And so there was a lot of defiance there. But really it was just that he wanted to emulate a person that he admired, and he had just learned that behavior from that person. So yes, we've noticed the new act. I see this happening a lot when kids start daycare, where parents will say, oh, my child started doing this, this, and this. They started biting and talking back and doing this. And it sort of coincided with the start of daycare, because now they're being exposed to other kids who have other behaviors. So we want to look at that. Are they just modeling what they're seeing in front of them? And is that behavior new and they're just curious? So that often can be a reason as well. So my final thoughts for today: once you've tried looking at these three areas, if you can't figure out what might be influencing your child's behavior, then it may be time to reach out for extra support. And even if it is one of those categories, if you feel uninformed, you can still reach out for support. Look to experts. You can come to us at Camray. You can go to your family doctor. If you are looking for some individual support, you can try to contact us here at Camray through our admin desk at admin@camray.ca, or you can give us a call at 604-436-9449, and to see if any of our services fit your needs. And like it says here, you can consult a family doctor or a doctor at a walk-in clinic, or any other expert in the field that you're looking for more information on. So thank you so much for joining us today.